what you had. And then I think you were also depressed and there was other things going on.
We think you need to talk to Scott and set some real boundaries because everyone else is in the middle.
How would you describe your relationship today?
I feel like we're great friends and co-parents.
I am pregnant.
You just keep suckering me into these kids.
I wasn't planning
I can't
this.
handle all this responsibility.
No. You're walking to the beach.
You're not walking into you. Look at you, you all. Shut the f up.
Rumors of a shocking split between Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker have been dominating headlines, with fans everywhere asking the same question: is the fairy tale finally over? But while the world was busy dissecting the whispers of divorce, Scott Disick dropped a secret message that sent social media into overdrive. His words weren't just random. They felt loaded, almost like a direct signal to Kourtney. Some fans believe it was shade aimed at Travis. Others saw it as Scott's way of reminding Kourtney that he's still in her corner. And when you connect Scott's cryptic statement to everything that's been happening behind the scenes, the story takes a twist no one saw coming. To understand why Scott's message hit so hard, you first have to look at the image Kourtney and Travis built together. For years, their romance was painted as nothing short of a Hollywood fairy tale, the kind of love story that felt scripted for reality TV, yet real enough to convince millions that they'd finally cracked the code on happily ever after. From neighbors in Calabasas to red carpet soulmates, their relationship seemed to accelerate overnight. One moment they were longtime friends, the next they were headline fixtures, showering each other in grand gestures and public affection. Fans couldn't look away. Then came the moments that cemented their story. A beachside proposal surrounded by roses and candlelight, not one but multiple weddings. From a quick Vegas chapel ceremony to a lavish Italian celebration dripping in designer gowns and luxury. Each chapter looked bigger, bolder, and more dramatic than the last. And when Kourtney revealed she was pregnant, it felt like the final puzzle piece. With baby Rocky on the way, the couple was celebrated as couple goals, blending their families and proving that even in Hollywood, true love could shine through. To millions watching from the outside, it was more than just another celebrity romance. It became a cultural moment. The Kardashians, a family already defined by their ability to turn private lives into public entertainment, had a new star couple at the center of the spotlight. Every Instagram post, every kiss on the red carpet, every carefully staged photo looked like proof that Kourtney had finally found her forever. But as Scott would later hint, fairy tales are only convincing if you don't look too closely behind the curtain. And behind this one, the cracks had already started to form. While the world was swept up in the spectacle of roses, weddings, and endless PDA, those closest to Kourtney and Travis saw a different picture. The glossy image they projected online didn't always match the reality playing out behind closed doors. Insiders whispered about subtle moments that didn't quite fit the perfect couple narrative. At times, Travis's fiery temper peeked through in public, while Kourtney seemed distant or distracted. Paparazzi caught candid moments where the chemistry looked less like passion and more like performance. Gestures that once felt spontaneous suddenly appeared rehearsed, and then there were the shadows of Travis's past. Old rumors of infidelity and messy relationships began resurfacing, reminding everyone that behind the tattoos and rock star charm was a history that didn't just disappear with a wedding ring. To fans scrolling Instagram, these whispers were easy to ignore. To people like Scott Disick, who had known Kourtney for years, the cracks were impossible to miss. Some fans started noticing the disconnect too. Online, the couple was inseparable, flooding feeds with declarations of love and dramatic captions. But in real life, the energy wasn't always the same. Small inconsistencies between their public and private selves began to spark questions. Was this whirlwind romance moving too fast? Could a love this explosive really last? Scott's recent message only fueled the speculation. Because if the cracks were visible this early on, his cryptic words might have been less of a surprise and more of a confirmation, but nothing made those cracks more obvious than a ghost from the past that resurfaced right at the heart of the Kardashian family. There was one revelation that made fans question the fairy tale more than any other. It was this. Years before he ever married Kourtney, Travis Barker openly admitted in his memoir that he had a crush on Kim Kardashian, Kourtney's younger sister. At the time, it seemed like harmless celebrity oversharing, the kind of juicy confession that tabloids love and fans quickly forget. But once Travis and Kourtney's romance turned serious, that detail came back like a ghost that refused to stay buried. And it wasn't just about something he wrote years ago. Travis's ex-wife, Shanna Moakler, went further, claiming his admiration for Kim crossed lines it shouldn't have. She alleged that his attraction wasn't just a casual crush, but something that flirted with betrayal. Travis denied ever being unfaithful with Kim, but he didn't deny finding her attractive. For Kourtney, that distinction hardly erased the sting. Imagine the tension that created. Every family dinner, every holiday, Every public appearance with her sister carried an unspoken weight. Even if nothing physical ever happened, the thought lingered. And in a family as public as the Kardashians, whispers turned into headlines overnight. Scott, who had lived through years of Kardashian drama himself, wasn't shocked. In private, he suggested that this revelation cut deeper than fans realized. He knew Kourtney's need for loyalty, and the idea that her husband once desired her own sister wasn't just a headline. It was a wound that forgiveness could cover, but never fully heal. Fans noticed it too. Social media erupted with theories, asking whether Travis's past feelings for Kim were fueling the long-standing rivalry between the sisters. Their arguments had already become reality TV legend, but this new twist gave it an edge that felt more personal than ever. Even Travis seemed frustrated by the rumors, dismissing them as ridiculous in interviews. But for Kourtney, denial didn't erase doubt. And for Scott, watching from the sidelines, it was proof that the shadows of the past were now haunting the present. The cracks were no longer just whispers. They were spilling out into the open. And when sibling rivalry and marriage collided, things only got messier. The Kardashian sisters have never been strangers to drama. For years, fans have watched Kourtney and Kim clash on reality TV, trading insults, questioning each other's priorities, even coming to blows in some of the show's most infamous scenes. But once Travis entered the picture, those old wounds didn't fade. If anything, they deepened. At first, it seemed like the sisters might finally be finding common ground again. Kourtney shared a heartfelt birthday tribute to Kim, and tabloids rushed to frame it as a peace offering. Headlines declared that the sisters were finally moving forward, but the truce didn't last long. Weeks later, Kourtney shocked everyone when she showed up to Halloween dressed as Kim. Not just any Kim, she recreated Kim's infamous floral Met Gala look, complete with slick ponytail and faux baby bump. Social media exploded. Was it a playful inside joke between siblings? Or was it a subtle dig? A reminder of Travis's old crush that had never fully disappeared. Opinions split instantly. Some fans defended Kourtney, calling it lighthearted fun. Others called it petty, even cruel. Proof that the rivalry was far from over. And as usual, the internet couldn't stop dissecting every detail. But Scott Disick, who had spent years in the middle of Kardashian family drama, wasn't surprised. To him, this wasn't harmless banter. He hinted that what the public saw as playful, shade was actually just the surface of something much deeper, and a rivalry that had spilled straight into Kourtney's marriage. Even Hulu's trailers for the Kardashians leaned into the tension, teasing heated conversations and icy stares between the sisters. Fans who once rooted for the family's unity now tuned in to watch the fractures grow. Every family dinner, every group photo, every holiday gathering seemed to carry an edge. The rivalry wasn't just about fame, business, or personality differences anymore. It was about trust, betrayal, and the uncomfortable truth that Kourtney's husband once had eyes for her sister. For Kourtney, the reminder was impossible to escape. For Scott, it was another red flag waving in plain sight. And if the sister drama wasn't enough, the next cracks came straight from Travis himself, a past filled with chaos, temptation, and mistakes that were impossible to ignore. Long before he was known as Kourtney Kardashian's husband, Travis Barker had already built a reputation that followed him everywhere. The world knew him as a rock star who lived fast, loud, and reckless, and his relationships reflected that same chaos. His ex-wife, Shanna Moakler, painted a picture of endless temptations, wild nights, and betrayals that left scars long after their divorce. She accused him of stepping out on her multiple times, even suggesting that infidelity wasn't an exception but a pattern. Travis never denied his struggles with loyalty. In fact, in interviews, he admitted that settling down had never come easy. He described himself as someone who valued independence, freedom, and the adrenaline of the moment. To some, his honesty sounded refreshing, but to anyone watching him promise forever, it sounded like a warning. Scott Disick, who knew Kourtney better than most, claimed he saw those warning signs from the very beginning. He suggested that Travis's history of broken trust wasn't just tabloid gossip, it was a red flag waving in plain sight. And while the public swooned over every red carpet kiss and steamy Instagram post, Scott believed those very displays were part of the problem. What looked like passion to millions of fans, he hinted, was actually performance. A carefully curated show designed to prove their love was unshakable, even when cracks were already spreading beneath the surface. And the more over-the-top the PDA became, the more people began to question whether it was real intimacy or simply an illusion. Even within the Kardashian circle, whispers started to spread. Was Travis really a changed man, or was he just caught up in the Kardashian spotlight, repeating old patterns under a new name? Because history has a way of repeating itself, and for Travis Barker, history was filled with messy endings. The question wasn't whether he loved Kourtney, but whether he could love her the way she needed, with loyalty, stability, and respect. And as insiders revealed, the balance of power in their relationship was beginning to shift in ways that made people wonder if this love story was more about control than connection. In the early days of her romance with Travis, Kourtney Kardashian looked like she was living a dream. She glowed on red carpets, posted endless declarations of love, and smiled through every public appearance. But those closest to her noticed subtle changes that told a different story. Her style shifted, her routines adapted, and even her diet began to mirror Travis's rock and roll lifestyle. What looked like a glow-up to fans felt like compromise to friends who had known her independence for years. To them, it seemed less like Kourtney finding herself and more like Kourtney reshaping herself to fit into Travis's world. Family members reportedly voiced concern. Kim, Khloe, and others whispered that Kourtney didn't seem like her usual confident, stubborn self, the woman who had always resisted being told what to do. Instead, she appeared to be bending more than ever, aligning her choices with Travis's preferences. Scott Disick didn't hesitate to weigh in. Having spent nearly a decade with Kourtney, he recognized the difference immediately. In his eyes, this wasn't just love. It was control disguised as romance. He suggested that the constant compromises were slowly erasing the very independence that made Kourtney who she was. And then there was the PDA. At first, fans ate it up, the steamy Instagram posts, the kisses that never seemed to end, the constant hand-holding. But over time, what once looked like raw passion began to feel calculated, as if the affection was less about connection and more about convincing the world, and maybe even themselves, that their marriage was unbreakable. For some, this was the first sign that the relationship wasn't balanced. It wasn't two equals building a life together, but one partner slowly reshaping the other. And as Scott hinted, once control slips into a relationship, it rarely leaves. The cracks were now deeper than ever, and when fame collided with Travis's grueling tour schedule, those cracks became impossible to hide. For most couples, traveling together is a chance to bond. But for Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker, life on the road became a pressure cooker that exposed the very cracks people had been whispering about. When Kourtney decided to join Travis on Blink-182's world tour in Australia, bringing baby Rocky and her older kids along, fans thought it was sweet. A rock star husband blending his chaotic career with family life. It looked like proof their love could survive anything. On Instagram, the story seemed picture perfect. Kourtney smiling with the kids, Travis posing backstage, the family sharing adorable snapshots that painted them as united and unstoppable. But eyewitnesses told a different story. Travis, they said, looked tense. His body language gave away frustration even when he greeted fans. And while Kourtney put on a smile for photos, those close to her claimed she was exhausted, juggling motherhood, long flights, jet lag, and the expectations of being the endlessly supportive wife. The strain became obvious when Valentine's Day arrived. Instead of spending the romantic holiday together, Travis was performing in one city while Kourtney stayed behind in Sydney with the kids. Headlines pounced on the detail. A couple who once flaunted their inseparability couldn't even be in the same place for Valentine's Day. For fans, it was more proof that something wasn't right. Behind the scenes, things were even tougher. Friends revealed that Kourtney leaned heavily on her inner circle just to get through the long days. What should have been a family adventure started to feel like a grind, and the distance between her and Travis grew more obvious with each stop on the tour. Scott Disick wasn't surprised. Watching from afar, he suggested this was exactly the kind of situation that revealed the truth. Public displays and glossy Instagram posts could hide a lot at home, but life on the road magnified everything. Travis was caught between being the rock star and the family man, and Kourtney was left trying to keep up. To fans, it looked like a couple out of sync. To Scott, it looked like confirmation that the cracks weren't new. They were just finally too big to ignore. And when the tour ended, another revelation would raise even more eyebrows, one that made people question whether Kourtney and Travis were ever really living like a married couple at all. For most couples, marriage is about building a home together. But for Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker, tying the knot didn't mean sharing a roof. Even after multiple weddings and the arrival of baby Rocky, the two continued living in separate houses across the street from one another in Calabasas. On the surface, the arrangement was framed as practical. Both had children from previous relationships, each with their own bedrooms, routines, and comfort zones. Uprooting them overnight, Kourtney explained, might have created unnecessary chaos. To her, keeping separate homes was a way to protect the kids' stability. But to fans, the explanation didn't quite add up. Why stage lavish weddings that screamed unity only to go home to different houses? Why project endless intimacy on Instagram while choosing distance in private? The optics felt off. Then came the detail that raised even more eyebrows. Kourtney admitted that she often co-slept. Not with Travis, but with her daughter Penelope. For some, it was a touching example of a close mother-daughter bond. For others, it painted a picture of a marriage lacking intimacy behind closed doors. Scott Disick didn't miss the irony. He hinted that while Kourtney and Travis played the role of the inseparable power couple in public, their private lives told a very different story. Separate homes, separate routines, separate beds. To him, this wasn't a sign of thoughtful parenting. It was a red flag. The distance mattered too. A relationship that once thrived on over-the-top closeness now seemed perfectly comfortable with physical separation. And in a marriage already strained by jealousy, exhaustion, and old ghosts, that distance felt less like maturity and more like foreshadowing. To fans, it was unsettling. To Scott, it was confirmation. The so-called Hollywood fairy tale wasn't just showing cracks, It was slowly unraveling from the inside out, and when Scott finally broke his silence with his secret message, those suspicions gained a whole new weight. For months, Scott Disick stayed quiet while the world obsessed over Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker's whirlwind love story. He played the role of the supportive co-parent, showing up to family events, smiling politely on camera, and carefully avoiding comments that could stir the pot. But that silence didn't last forever. When Scott finally spoke, through what fans called his secret message, it shook the narrative completely. His words weren't long, but they were sharp, loaded, and impossible to ignore. Some saw them as subtle shade aimed directly at Travis, others as a signal to Kourtney that he still had her back. Either way, the timing was no coincidence. The message dropped just as whispers of divorce were louder than ever, and fans immediately began connecting the dots. Scott didn't mince his perspective. He implied that the so-called fairy tale was more spectacle than substance, that the roses, the weddings, and the endless PDA were a performance designed to distract from cracks that had been there all along. He suggested that Kourtney had lost pieces of herself in the relationship, reshaping her identity to fit into Travis's world. To Scott, this wasn't romance. It was warning signs dressed up as a love story. And then came the remark that cut the deepest. Scott openly questioned whether Travis had ever truly changed. With a history defined by infidelity and turbulence, he implied that Travis was falling back into the same patterns: cracks in loyalty, cracks in trust, cracks that no amount of Instagram affection could cover up. Fans split instantly. Some accused Scott of bitterness, unable to move on from his past with Kourtney. Others praised him for finally saying what everyone else was thinking, that behind the fairy tale was a marriage already crumbling. His words reignited the divorce rumors and gave them a credibility no tabloid could match. Because Scott wasn't just another critic. He was the father of Kourtney's children, a man who had lived through years inside the Kardashian machine, who knew the difference between what played on screen and what happened in private. When he spoke, people listened, and his message was clear. This love story was never as perfect as it seemed. With his silence broken, every awkward Valentine's apart, every separate home, every icy sister stare started to feel less like gossip and more like evidence. And for many, Scott's words didn't just comment on Kourtney and Travis's marriage, they predicted its downfall. From the outside, Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker's romance looked like a Hollywood dream. A whirlwind proposal surrounded by roses, multiple weddings fit for royalty, the birth of baby Rocky, and a blended family that seemed picture perfect. To millions of fans, they were living proof that true love could survive the spotlight. But once you peel back the carefully crafted image, a very different story emerges. Old ghosts from Travis's past never fully disappeared. From his messy history of infidelity to his infamous crush on Kim Kardashian, the rivalry between Kourtney and Kim only added fuel to the fire, turning family dinners into battlegrounds. Their public displays of affection, once seen as passion, began to feel like performance. The Australian tour exposed exhaustion and emotional distance. And the revelation that they weren't even living under the same roof left fans questioning if they were ever truly united. And then came Scott Disick's secret message, a cryptic remark that turned whispers into headlines. To some, his words were fueled by jealousy. To others, they were brutally honest, confirming what fans had suspected all along, that the fairy tale was built more on spectacle than on substance, and the cracks had always been there, waiting to show. Now, with divorce rumors growing louder, one question hangs over everything. Are Kourtney and Travis just weathering the natural storms of a high-pressure Hollywood marriage? Or are we watching the slow unraveling of a love story that burned too bright too fast? Only time will tell whether they fight to prove everyone wrong or become the next Kardashian couple to collapse under the spotlight. But one thing is certain, in this family, the drama never ends. So now it's your turn. What do you think Scott's secret message really meant? Was it a sign that he still has feelings for Kourtney? Or simply his way of calling out a love story he never believed in? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because when it comes to the Kardashians, the next twist is always right around the corner.